Bienvenidos a Buscando Certeza, mi nombre es Gonzalo Perilou. La siguiente es una entrevista a Gesar Mukpo. Gesar es una de las primeras personas en nacer en Occidente y ser reconocidas como el renacimiento de un maestro tibetano. Gesar nace en 1973 y es uno de los hijos de Chogyam Trunpa Rinpoche y Diana Mukpo. A los 3 años de edad fue reconocido por el gran maestro Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, de quien ya hablamos en este podcast, como la reencarnación, o mejor dicho, el renacimiento de Shechen Kontrul Rinpoche, es decir, un gran maestro tibetano, que también era conocido como el Shechen Kontrul de Shechen, quien en una vida pasada había sido el maestro de Dzogchen de su padre, es decir, de las instrucciones de meditación más elevadas o, si se quieren, más sutiles. Así, a los 3 años de edad, Gesar fue entronizado en Berkeley, California, como el sucesor del previo Shechen Kontrul. Ahora bien, a diferencia de lo que era esperado de él, y esto lo dice Gesar Rinpoche, Gesar decidió por no dedicarse a la carrera del sostenedor del linaje o de maestro espiritual, sino que sigue muy involucrado con el budismo y con la cultura tibetana, pero desde un ángulo más artístico. Y así, hace algunos años, compuso y dirigió el documental Tulku, en donde entrevista a varios occidentales en su misma situación, es decir, de occidentales que habían sido reconocidos en Occidente como el renacimiento de un maestro tibetano fallecido. Y en este documental es sumamente interesante ver la problemática que plantea en donde estos chicos intentan encontrar su identidad en el mundo moderno. Para aquellos que no hayan visto el documental, se los recomiendo. En esta entrevista, Gesar reflexiona sobre su vida, su trabajo actual, su propósito y su relación con su padre. Esta entrevista fue realizada originalmente en inglés, por lo tanto, para quienes no dominen el idioma, les sugiero activar los subtítulos. Pueden hacerlo si están mirando el podcast en YouTube, Spotify o en cualquier otra plataforma de podcast. Simplemente accedan al menú y seleccionen el subtítulo en español. Espero que disfruten de la entrevista con Gesar Mukpo. Gesar Mukpo, you have one of the most powerful Tibetan names I heard. I love it. You have a unique story because you were recognized as the reincarnation of a Tibetan teacher in the West when you were 3 years old. Could you start by sharing more about that experience?
Yeah, I was recognized at 2 years old in Berkeley, California, by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. He was visiting the United States at that point, and I was enthroned in Berkeley. It would have been 75.
Yeah, and not only that, but you are the son of Chogyam Trunpa, so I think also your perspective in Dharma or the way that you grow up with Dharma is very different, because for us it's something that we adopt. Like we start reading a book probably and we just connect with the teacher and then we join some Dharma center. But for you, is probably was something very normal just to be in a Dharma environment or a Dharma center and people talking about Dharma. How it was when you grow up, that environment? Like, were you spending a lot of time in Dharma centers? How did you grow up in that environment?
So, I mean, the first thing was for me, which you'll hear if you like sort of read anything about the time, like my mother's book or stuff like that. There was a lot of people around. And so my father's house was always like a lot of activity going on and people coming in and out and some kind of events being organized that were somehow passing through the house, parts of it. And so there was like always a lot of energy. So like, from a young age there, I already had the sense of like, oh, something is going on here. Um, something beyond just like a regular family life. Like there's other things going on here. My father's part of something. It's like weird when you
Mhm.
started to talk, the memory that came into my mind, and not to be like too graphic, but I remember when I was a little boy, some lady came into the house and she was just crying, and she had like they'd done like I don't know X-rays or something of her child, and she had like some horrific miscarriage, and she's just sort of recounting what she'd seen and like crying. And I was like a little boy, maybe like 8 years old or something like that. And this lady's like waiting in the sitting room, and then they bring her some tissues,
Right.
and you know, um, And then finally she goes up to see my dad. I'm just kind of like hiding in the corner, like seeing what's going on. Just like that sense, like someone is going through like that painful of a moment in their life. Like of course anyone, doesn't matter how much you can sense that, and that in that moment that they were coming to my father for help. Um, and like that's like a very specific energy, and like that energy was around a lot. And so it's like, what was my introduction to the Dharma? I'd say like that was my introduction to the Dharma. It's like this like intense, painful, samsaric energy going on, and like people in some way trying to process it through their interaction with my father and the Dharma. Um, and so I'd say, yeah, my earliest experiences of the Dharma were like people in traumatic, painful moments of their life looking for some kind of guidance or support. Um, and that was kind of like, that might happen in someone's life once every 30 years. But like for my dad, it was like every single day that kind of thing was being brought in front of
Yeah.
him. And so like,
Right.
that's like, I would say my introduction is like, there's something heavy going on and there's something helpful happening.
Right. And at some point, did you start getting formal teachings?
I guess like for me, no, like my
Okay.
only like teaching I think I ever got from my father was,
Mhm.
and once again, I was like pretty young. And like a lot of people will tell you this about my father. He would just spend a lot of time sitting around, and like it seemed like he was just doing nothing. It's like if you open the door, he's just sitting there in silence.
Mhm.
And like, one time I opened the door to his like sitting room, and there's
Mhm.
my dad just sitting on his couch, like doing nothing. And he looks at me, he's like, "I'm dying." And I said, "What do you mean? No, you're not dying." I said, "No, I'm dying right now." I was like, totally. I mean, I must have started crying. He's like, "Yes, like, I'm gonna die. Like, we're all gonna die. You're gonna die, but I'm dying right now." And I mean, it was of course for a little kid, it was like pretty, like maybe sad. Um, but I literally feel like that's the only teaching that my
Mhm.
father was. There's some like like my biggest lessons were kind of mundane moments, um, or like things that he said to me, just little things, like things that really stick with me. Like we were staying at this hotel when I was young, and I saw a ghost. And I mean, well, here's the story. The place called Lake Louise, and we were having a seminary there. Like a bunch of people were there for like, I don't know, at least a month. And I was staying in this room where there's like the doors where they kind of have like a latch. You lift up on it, this little thing goes up, clink, clink, and opens the door. And I'm laying in bed. Once again, I'm a little
Mhm.
kid, like 10 years old or less, and things just jingling. So I sit up, and then it opens. I don't see anything, but then it's like, it was almost like just like static electricity kind of got more and more fuzzy. Then all of a sudden became a person in front of me, and he grabbed my foot, and I think I screamed, and they took his hand up, he started to back away, and they turned around, and then right after he turned around, his back kind of became his front again, and he was looking at me as he kind of walked out the door, and then I screamed again, and like someone came running in, and my mom just kind of calmed me down. She's like, "It was a dream. You're okay." And I was like pretty upset, and then she took me to my dad, and my dad's like, "No, it's a ghost." Like of course, like he's my son, he gets ghosts. Like of course. Um, so I mean, that's a long story to get back to the one point, which is it was basically like, my sort of teachings for him were moments like that, where it was like, you know, the interaction between us was like of like certainty and belief, you know, um, which is also like one of those qualities. Like I
Right.
spent a lot of time around Dilgo Khyentse when I was 13, 14 years old, 15. Um, and he was the type of guy that would like not speak a word with you, but then when someone asked about you, would have like good things to say about you. Um, I mean,
Mhm.
I think I say this to a lot of people. It's like I've got to meet a lot of these amazing teachers, Kali Rinpoche and Dilgo Khyentse and Karmapa, and I mean, just all these amazing teachers, and it gave me this like reference point to how I see other people, and it's like maybe unfair for other people. But that's like, I guess what I would say is like my experience and my teachings of the Dharma for like my dad or these early people or in my early years is there was a way to be, you know, and that's definitely stuck with me a lot. Like the other things have come and gone and I've learned a lot, but like that kind of attitude, that way of treating people is really something you find if you hang out around that kind of person, no matter what faith they are.
Yeah, it's fascinating because that's something that I also see in most of the teachers. Like Chogyam Rinpoche is my main teacher, and I never heard him talking bad about someone, and that's something that we can train on. You know, you just look at the good qualities of people, and that, I don't know, the effect in the other person listening is, you know, positive rather than just talking about the bad qualities that we all have. Um, and what you just mentioned about the ghost is interesting as well. How kids have such a different perception of the world. I remember a friend of mine was hanging out with a tulku, but at some point he said, "Oh, look at this." I can't remember the words, but something like a deity or a spirit will take this person, and then the person started running around in the monastery and doing all these weird things, and he was seeing as the act of this spirit was happening. I wonder what we can do different when raising kids, just to not lose that, you know, at some point. And I don't know if it is just a matter of the parents when they hear the kid saying something that doesn't fit their worldview, just shutting it down, and maybe at some point, you know, it just naturally fades out from the kid. But that's something very very interesting. Did you have more experiences like
Not
that,
much,
or like
not many,
you?
no. But I think it was
Mhm.
um, like my father definitely believed in spirits and saw them and communicated with them a lot. So
Right.
um, it was just something I was aware of. Like, you know, we went to a lot of haunted places. Um, and my dad was like a lightning rod for spirits. It's like they all wanted to check him out. So things would happen. Um, and once again, it was like, you know, being around that energy, it was kind of like for me as a young person, I was like, oh, that's also a possibility. Yeah. That kind of stuff is a possibility. I mean, it's like an
Right.
interesting thing. I mean, everyone has
Right.
their own version, but you know, I think of like maybe Tibetan or Indian children. It's like you learn things like don't pee in a river because you'll piss off the Naga that lives there. You know,
Hmm.
I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
and so that's
Yeah.
like, you know, in some ways, like really ingrained in you. You know, but it's also like it comes coupled with this like respect for the world around you. Um, and so it's just kind of like
Totally.
I feel like yeah, that was it's a way. It's kind of a different approach, you know. And I mean, like as far as my father and like how he dealt with me as a child, it was just kind of like, you know, everything's possible.
That's a very positive attitude. And actually, like, this modern society is the only one that doesn't believe in spirits. If you look back in pretty much every culture, they have some belief in spirits in one way or another. So yeah, that's also an interesting fact. Um, So, since you were recognized and when you were hanging out with Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche as well, how the fact of being recognized as a tulku affect your life? Did you have to do something different? Because I don't think you were pulled into a monastery, right? Per se into
Yeah,
a
I
monastery.
but it was always like recreational visits, you know what I mean? Not like hardcore. You know, I kind of went and checked it
Yeah.
out and saw how I felt about it. But of course, it affected my life because from like the age of 13, which is when my father passed away, it was kind of my family was like, oh, how do we immerse him in his father's traditions so that he can have it as part of his life? And it's like pretty confusing task to have. Um, but I was definitely like had an unusual life at that age because I, you know, went to Nepal at 13 and um, was traveling in Asia till I was like 15, studying and meeting teachers and doing stuff. And like, you know, it's the whole thing of like, how do you integrate two different cultures? I was brought up in a Western culture and it was a difficult fit. So, I didn't like last long in the East, but I kept going back. Um, but
Hmm.
I guess the way it affected me was like from the age of 13, I just didn't do the things that normal kids were doing. I was over in Asia and I was going to like Dharma programs and um, had a whole lot of expectation put upon me. And I always like
Yeah.
to think of it this way, like the sort of bottom line for me is like if people that couldn't get my father to listen to them would come to me, I was like the third alternative. And so I just had like a
Mm.
lot of people sort of unloading really
Yeah.
heavy things on me, like even when I was a little kid. And, so yeah, it affected my life a ton. There's everything that's positive and negative too. Like I definitely like the negative was like just taking it all
Yeah.
for granted. And also it's like the obstacle is like if it's too close, you don't get it. And so I didn't understand a lot of things. And I feel like it's just like the last couple years of my life that I'm starting to understand the most basic things. Um, because you just
Hmm.
assume and have an arrogance of knowing the things you're brought up around. Sometimes it takes like to actually you have to learn the things you're brought up around to
Right.
understand them. It's like a super important part of the evolution of like learning your culture when you're displaced.
Yeah, when you were around Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, when I was preparing for this interview, I think you mentioned that when your father passed, there wasn't you didn't see a clear path on how to what to do in the future, and it's something that you have to figure out, especially at that age. You either I don't know, go to school like a normal kid, or you are fully immersed, or find a balance between the two. But later on, when you were around Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, did you have the feeling that he had a plan, or he wanted you just to be around, to be immersed in the Dharma, and see for yourself if this is what you wanted to do?
I um I just feel like there's no plan whatsoever. It's just like learn to be present, And it was kind of like for
Hmm.
them with me was it was like I'd say the what I was left with my time with Dilgo Khyentse is him sort of expressing to me that you can study everything to get where you need to get. Like there's like no obstacles. Just kind of like yeah, you can
Hmm.
learn everything from
Right.
the Dharma that's been presented to you already, and you'll be okay. Like that'll be enough. It's like pretty generous. But then again, it's true. I mean, this is the thing.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and it's like we feel bad when we fall short of where we think we should be. It's like, and I don't know. It's like as a
Hmm.
Dharma student, you think you should like be better than other people sometimes, not as angry, not as hooked, not as emotional. But it's like that's not true, right? Um, you're exactly the same. So to feel like bad about that is also like needs to be examined. And
Hmm.
I'm going long-winded, long version again, but it's kind of um, I realized at some point it's like you couldn't know, like you can't know everything, and even like to make it small from Dharma, it's like you can't know all the
Hmm.
teachings. You can pick certain ones and know those and
Yeah.
practice certain ones. You're not going to memorize every text and you're not going to know every practice. You're not going to have every realization. In fact, like the different paths of what they say 80,000 contradict each other often, and so it's like you can't collect stuff. And there's
Hmm.
something else I was listening to Gesar Khyentse talk about, and this is a super loose quote, but it's like if you think you can kind of study things and learn them and then just keep those to go back to later, like you've done that already, it's like once you learn something, you go back, it's changed. It's not true anymore. It's like you can't just like learn things and have everything and have done it.
Right.
It's like always, and so for
Yeah.
me, it's like this realization that it's like, there's no point in studying Dharma if you're enlightened. I mean, it's like Dharma is for the
Hmm. Yeah.
non-enlightened, and like, we're just struggling. We're all
Yeah.
struggling. And so it's like in my father and these teachers in Dilgo Khyentse, it's like this. You see this like super acceptance of life, just how it is and how people are. And for me, like I guess as far as what I took from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche and my time with him was just kind of like you just live life and go through life. It's not, I mean, there's nothing super fancy being expected by your teacher.
Yeah, and I can imagine especially when we are teenagers, how if someone is imposing you, like, oh, you are a tulku, so you have to do this and that, and we are expecting you to do this and that, and probably the person will do the opposite, like if you have the choice, because it's like we want just to figure it out by ourselves what we want to do, and so I can only imagine how difficult is that situation, especially you being one of the very earliest tulku being born in the modern world. I read somewhere that you mentioned that you don't know if you make the right decision by just choosing, what you are doing now. And I guess we all have that regret every single day. I'm wondering if I did the right decision yesterday by choosing, even in small things. So how do you feel about reflecting back on the decisions that you took, that led you where
Mm.
you are now?
That's every question has its sub questions. And so for me, that like brings up two other questions. The first thing is like, oh, the standard, like from what you're talking about, this first part is like, oh, I fucked up by not doing it. That's like one thing. Oh, I fucked up by not doing it. And then there's like the life experience that I've had now, which is like, you can only be where you are. And that's beyond okay. That's like best. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's a side that's
Hmm.
like, it's not a big deal if people want you to be that, or if you try to be that thing either. It's like either way, it's not really to push back to not have to do it is also in some way just spending time thinking about it. The ultimate not caring about it is just to do maybe give it a try anyway. um, and so what I'm saying is
Hmm.
that um, I would have felt different about this a lot of times in my life or guilt, and I don't now because I truly, honestly believe that I've somehow found a way to make the most of my situation, and it's like it should be like alchemy, not like construction. That's what I believe out of life is it shouldn't just be construction. It has to be alchemy. Something magical has to come out of what you do. And like I truly believe the path that I'm on now is the one that makes the most use of all the things I've been provided with, which for me, I feel like my mission on life right now is through the medium of film and television to kind of shine light on the contributions of Eastern masters and Eastern culture for Western civilization. And I'm like uniquely positioned to tell some of these stories, and I have a lot of access and a lot of credibility and a lot of goodwill and support. And so I'm like, I can't think of something better I could be doing with myself. And so I kind of feel differently about things nowadays because it's kind of usually like feeling guilty is sort of I would associate with like not being able to breathe well, like tight chest,
Hmm.
fear, you know, and I still know I could have maybe done more with my life, but I also know that I've managed to find a place in my life that feels like I'm doing the right thing. And I think that's all that you can ask. Um, like my father wanted me to be doing something where I felt confident and that it was encompassed who I was, whatever it was. It didn't have to be Dharma. Could have been like whatever.
Right.
Um, and like also that like takes me back to something really important about my father is like my father's initial teachings were all about art, like Dharma art and visual Dharma. Um, art has always been incredibly important to like his teachings, photography and ikebana and calligraphy,
Hmm.
poetry. Um, there's like something really magical that happens when you're creative, and so I feel like I've really followed in the same path as my father in some way, which is like just exploring new modes of creativity and just going that direction. And then secondly, I feel like I'm really contributing to to the people that need to be recognized. So sometimes the mistake leads to a better reality, and that's the way I feel about things now. Yeah. Um, we have to do different
I'm
things,
glad
right?
to
We
hear
have to do all
that.
kinds of different things. So, um, no, just like me
Yeah, go
feeling
ahead.
pride when I see Tibetan rappers or actors or filmmakers or Tibetan martial artists or, soccer players. It's like, you feel like some kind of pride, right? Um, so it's motivating. It's like, what I'm saying is just like when you see someone fulfilling their own cause and it connects to a greater cause as well. It's like, even if it's a small cause that they're representing, that's like
Hmm.
a super important part of a bigger puzzle, which is everyone trying their hardest. Everyone doesn't have to be the best. Everyone has to just
Yeah.
have a heart. So,
Yeah, that's very inspiring to hear. Because also, on the other hand, if you would have pursued the Lama career, it was kind of a self-fulfilling thing. You just have to hang in there. No one is going to check if you attain realization before you start teaching that. So what I'm trying to say is there is no perfect path, as you just mentioned. We just live and make our choices, and we try our best. But also the life that you choose is not the easiest one. It's not the easiest because of all the pressure that you had behind you and the expectations of the different, the so-called important people. It's interesting the fact that you still did a lot of contribution to the Tibetan
oh
cause.
yeah, yeah. I've been one of the things I've been doing, among other things, is I'm developing a dramatic television series based on my father, Chogyam Trunpa, on his life, and I've been doing a lot of research. I've been working on it for the last 3 years now, and I've been doing all kinds of research and just getting to know about my father and getting into the details and breaking free from like the mythology. And it's like I found this amazing thing. It's like every time I found out the truth of how he suffered or struggled, I just felt like more connected, you know. And it was like as the mythology
Hmm.
broke down, it felt more real. Um, and like my father, just
Hmm.
like he had like really, he went through a lot of difficult things, you know. He moved to England in 1963, and it just been like a few months before that, like people of color were allowed to ride on the front of the bus in England. Um, and he was coming there trying to teach Dharma. So, um, he went through a lot, and it was like there were so many times in my father's life that things could have fallen apart and been derailed so easily. Like 1,000 different things could have happened a little differently.
Hmm.
Um, and so I guess I connect with my father a lot more recently because I just realized like he just struggled really hard, um, and like he stood for something, and that's that's super motivating.
Hmm.
And like what he stood for was just um, like Dharma should be accessible to everyone. I mean, it's like really the piece of it all.
Yeah.
So I look at his contributions, I feel like super motivated to kind of give him his due. Yeah, and I just think in general the West is like just
I don't think there is a Tibetan Dharma center in the world that hasn't been affected in one way or another by your father's
it's been
teachings.
really interesting with me lately because I've been really involved in the Tibetan community, and I've just noticed this like in the last few years, this huge appreciation from the Tibetan community for my father. And it's mainly because there's like all these Tibetans are now quite successful in the West. They have shops and businesses, and they're seeing the struggles that come with that, you know, um, running your own business, owning property, whatever it is. And just seeing how
Hmm.
my father navigated that at the time that he did is like, wow, he was a pioneer. Um, and so, it's
Yeah.
that also, it's like, yeah, he did it when no one else was doing it. So I mean, for that, I'm also like, um, I feel a huge connection with him too, like in seeing other people giving him his respect. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I think he needs, and he's just credited a
Mhm.
little. And I think, the West in general, it's like, and it's no fault, but it's like we have the mindfulness movement and meditation and yoga. And, you know, I was listening to a podcast a couple years ago, and there was a lady talking about how she studied a certain type of meditation at a center in Colorado and went to a retreat center and did a meditation program, a very specific type of meditation. And she works with the U.S. government, like making policy on treating soldiers with PTSD. Um, and I was just like connecting the dots. It's like basically like the U.S. government is using the type of meditation my father taught to help military members with PTSD to cope. Um, they have no idea where that's coming from, and there's like so
Mhm.
many things like this that was just like this inundation that came in the 60s and 70s to the
Yeah.
West. All of these things and all these teachers and all these contributions, and like they offer so much, and is in some way, and once again, no fault, it's just become assumed as part of Western culture. The word karma, even, like using that word.
Yeah.
It's like
Mhm.
normal language, but it's like that wasn't a thing before. And it's just like, oh, it's almost like it's just a thing we do. It's not like this was
Mhm.
like things were all gifted to us in some way. Um, and with all like the, real spotlight on the, with the Me Too and everything that happened, there's been a lot of criticism and a lot of look and a lot of pushback and a lot of like questions asked. And, and it got like overzealous in some way at some point where it was like, every Dharma teacher was being torn down, and like, people made mistakes. My father made mistakes. Um, but I think it's funny that people would try to tear him down or tear these teachers down without at least also giving some respect to what they've taken from there as well, because you can't take with one hand and like, and like give with the other or whatever it is, like, I mean, you can't like take and give, and like, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, you can't take what's good and give it to someone else
Mhm.
and then throw the other person that gave you it away. um,
Right.
and it's an important thing for the West right now.
Right.
I believe this truly. It's really important for the West. It's an important time for the West and people involved in like Eastern spirituality, mindfulness movement, to sort of address the sources of the practices they're doing in a way that can, be long-standing. Um, because it doesn't actually take much to put footnotes of where things came from, and it helps you to know them better. It's like when people are teaching things incorrectly
Mhm.
because it's some like mishmash of things. It's like it just takes a little bit of knowledge, and they can
Yeah.
get it right. And there's certain things that people do that are like, they say it's Tibetan. I'm like, it's not a Tibetan thing that you're doing. Um, so
Mhm. Yeah.
like, it's not like going to change things that much, but it's just like an important thing that's meant to happen right now. The Eastern people that contributed to the Western culture
Yeah.
of spirituality as it exists right now should just be acknowledged for the contributions they made. I think like Suzuki Roshi, who is one of the first masters to truly bring meditation in a digestible and pure way to the West, is like rarely known by anyone. And so I'm super motivated
Yeah.
by those things. And my father was part of that, and
Yeah, very interesting this project because in the same way, people ended up mixing all sort of practices together, and then they call it either Tibetan or yoga or whatever. And if you don't know the source where it came from, maybe it won't bring the result that is expected because you are practicing this to obtain a result that is not made for that. So that's your project right now.
I have a
Are
couple
you
of things.
working
But my big
on a
project is this
series?
developing a series about my father, which is just like a long term. I'm also doing documentaries right now, and currently, I finished shooting recently a documentary about Tibetan musicians and artists. It focuses on a family who are a hip hop group, and it sort of goes around and meets all these modern Tibetan musicians. And just, how I describe it is it's seeing what it means to live as a Tibetan refugee in 2024 through the eyes of a young Tibetan musician.
Did you publish it in
No,
some
it's like I literally
platform?
just finished shooting it. We're like editing and translating. It's gonna we're gonna go to film festivals,
Okay.
hopefully television, stuff like that. Yeah. Started a film production
Great.
company 2.5 years ago, um, with two branches. One is the stories of Eastern masters that came over in the 60s and 70s to the West, and the other side is telling the stories of refugee artists.
That's great. I remember when I met you back in Nepal, you were recording an interview with someone who flee Tibet with your
Yeah,
father.
Yonten Chronicles.
Project?
Yeah,
What was it?
I don't think
Okay.
the actual video ever got
Yeah.
released.
Did you
Maybe it got
record
released briefly, but I just had kind of at that point, yeah, they were interviewing him, and so I was filming it. But I was going to release something else. I never did. I still have all this footage. Um, it's kind of what got me where I am doing what I am doing right now. After I did my documentary Tulku, I really wanted to do a movie about my father's escape from Tibet, and just kind of the energy, a lot of energy put into it.
that?
Nothing came of it, but it sort of became what I'm doing now. But my father's escape from Tibet was just this amazing. Yeah. This project that I'm doing now, that's like about my father,
So
it has a
that
lot of flashbacks to his escape.
nice. So you're based on Born in Tibet book, and then you're trying to trace
It's
back what happened,
it
or
is based on a lot of different stuff. I've literally gotten everything, like I've gone through everything about my dad from multiple sources, but it draws on a lot of things. It draws on my mother's book as well. It draws on Born in Tibet. It draws on all kinds of stuff. But my project is an accurate look at what happened with my father, and then told through sort of a drama, but really placing what happened.
hmm.
Um, it covers the years 63 through 74. So basically, the year my dad arrived in England on a boat through the opening and founding of Europa University in
Hmm.
Colorado. Sort of like a super active 10-year period. And he died when he was
Right.
younger than me. He'd already accomplished all of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, a visionary. Do you think nowadays people are still criticizing your father? I maybe I'm too involved in with hardcore Buddhists, but I haven't seen that at all, and I don't think any of us can say anything about
I mean,
bad
of course,
at
there's
this.
people. It's just, of course, there's people out there that are still annoyed. But I think it's the internet is a great place if you're not happy. And so people that are unhappy have like a really loud
Hmm. Yeah.
voice. And I've been always super open, to talking to people and discussing stuff. But I think there's definitely still a negative energy around all kinds of teachers, because it's kind of easy to say something bad now at this point if you're not well informed or if you're well
Hmm.
informed, both. Um, so I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't, I think things have changed a lot now, but um, I feel
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's still criticism of my father out there because there was sexual promiscuity going on and stuff like that, and people just feel it was predatory. And so there's that's all. It's all. It will always be a topic that has to be brought up and addressed and faced. The big thing with me with my father is like, for instance, to give you like sort of a segue into my this thing I'm writing, or this show we're doing is like sort of like the scene is like Karma Chuling 1971, and you're at the main center, but there's no one there because it's lunchtime. And you go down to the river slowly through the forest. And as you go down to the river, you just see people having sex on either side of the path. And then some people, smoking weed, and some people swimming. People are just laying in the grass having sex, like right there. Um, I mean,
Mm.
so it's like you're telling stories, like, oh, it's so crazy what he was doing. I was like, yeah, you should have seen what the world was like, you know, with the young people in 1971, 72. It was like a crazy world, a lot of
Yeah.
crazy stuff going on. So it was like it affected people heavily, traumatically, lifelong, or not. But it was like a lot of shit happened at that time that people still don't understand, right? So it's everyone has their own opinion on it. And for me, it's not as much of worried like, oh, there being criticism of my father, but more just like, well, like, can you quantify what his contribution is? That's an interesting one, and that's like a
Mhm.
thing I argue with about people
Yeah.
that are students of my father. I'm like, well, you might like think of him more than what he did or incorrectly. So it's like I don't know. Like it's
Mhm.
um you have to be really careful of being like what like patriotic or whatever, like clan of being like clanny. So I don't know. It's like if there's people that there's still people that criticize everything. Um, but I'm also like I
Yeah.
don't like I won't have my father's contributions overlooked. That's my mission in life. It's just like I
Mhm.
want all these people that contributed towards what we have
Yeah.
now just to be recognized. They don't have to be worshipped or praised. They just have
Yeah.
to be known. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. And for any of us who has been, in the Tibetan Buddhist world, it is impossible to not see how much Chogyam Trunpa has contributed to the world. Like just not only bringing Buddhism to the West, but in teachings and in so many ways. So I guess it's different if you were involved in the situation while you were living with him, at that moment. But that was a long time ago. So I'm looking forward to your new project. Anything that brings light to his work is, I'm sure it would be amazing. And also what you mentioned, unless you have all his work in a library, it's difficult to perceive how much he has contributed to the way that we do practices nowadays and the way that we uh, listen to the Dharma and
For
so
me, I
on.
think in doing this project, the most complicated thing about my trying to understand my father's legacy in life is that everybody has different versions of what was happening. So it's like everyone remembers things completely
Yeah.
differently. So it's been an interesting kind of trying to fish through everything. And it's like two people can see something differently, and and neither can be wrong, which is like maddening. Um, and I think
Hmm.
that's what I'm going through a lot with my
Yeah.
dad. It's like everyone just there's so many stories. I've been researching and collecting, and like more and more people came to me, and at some point, I just had to be like, it's enough. Like how can there be seven versions of everything that happened? Um, I feel like that's like all of these masters. It's like there's so much further we could look at their life, and there really is like not actually good accounting of their lives. It's like all very anecdotal and like
Hmm.
opinionated, and what in 200 years, how people find out about my dad, Kobanchino Roshi, or will it be like one paragraph in some book written by some academic that grew up, in a completely different tradition? And that's like the reality. That's like really the
Yeah.
reality of things. Um, I guess it's not
Hmm.
that bad, but if you feel there's something that other people should be noticing, like I don't know. I guess it's not. I guess I'm asking myself this question: like, what is important to preserve? Like, I'm not really sure, but it should have a chance to be heard still and acknowledged. So, yeah. I also had this weird thing because it was like, well, I'm
Yeah.
like,
And
is somebody if we don't do something with this stuff, somebody else is going to. I think when I think of my father, I think of like a picture of Che
mhm.
Guevara. It's like on T-shirts, and it's like apparently like the original guy that took it never got any royalties, and like people are wearing it to go to college that don't even know who Che
Yeah.
Guevara is. It's like that's a road my
Yeah.
father could go down. So it's like we want to offer something more than that.
Right.
Then there's people that are like way too
Hmm.
into my dad. To me, to some degree, it's like okay, like there's other teachers as well. Like it's not the whole world doesn't have to be like Trungpa land. Um, so it's like I don't know like what the balance is, but I mean I definitely know there's something very important there and historically significant to the development of Dharma in the West.
Yeah, the media has changed as well. Like nowadays, less and less people read. So if you're not a hardcore reader, maybe you will never face the work of Chogyam Trunpa as well. So in that sense, there is something that you are in a unique position to do, because also what I notice is crazy wisdom and tulku, both are very entertaining in a way. So it's like pretty much to anyone who even is not a Buddhist probably will sit and want to listen to the story. Whereas there are a lot of Dharma movies that are really boring. It's just for
Right.
hardcore Buddhists, you know.
Exactly.
Um,
Want to make something that's appealing to every person that has a relative that's like been a refugee, every person that's ever studied any Eastern religion, any person that's done yoga, anyone that's like interested in Asia. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like I want to make something that's just like not for the hardcore Dharma practitioners. And that was something I went through when I was like working on this project, because I've been like sort of writing demos to show people, and some people have been like, Dharma students have been like, you're not expressing your father's teachings in a way that people can understand, or like I don't think I'm going to be
mhm.
doing that, like through television. Like I have bad news for you. You can only like go so
Yeah.
far. And so like be good at what you are trying to do, which is like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a criticism of my film Tulku as well. It's like you didn't get enough into the technical side of the Dharma. And, I was like, well, I was more making a film about feelings, than about like informational.
Yeah.
Um, Also, what I mean, God, I keep coming back to my dad. Maybe that's not all this is about, but like, it's really remarkable for me when I look right now, just like how much love people have for him. He died in 1987. Um, he's still like a significant part of people's everyday life. Um, and just for that alone, I
Yeah.
feel like, well, I can't have other people respecting my family more than me. And also just like, I mean, once coming back to earlier thing, just having met all these
Yeah.
teachers, it's like I feel bad if I just did nothing with myself and just kind of like was like a tourist walking past these people. Like I hope I took something with me.
Yeah.
I wish everyone could meet Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. You know,
Mhm.
I wish everyone could have walked in that room and just be like
Yeah.
feel the world a little differently. Uh,
Mhm.
but now you and me, we're the storytellers, and we're what people will go to learn. And um, it's got to be informative, but it's also got to be like from the heart and passion and like of caring about stuff. So um, like
Yeah.
we'll try to show people what they were like somehow. But I
Mhm.
mean, I'm always like good luck, but I do think it shows. I feel like it shows. I feel like it shows.
Yeah. And going back to what you say earlier, we just try our best with what we can right now, and that's good enough. It has to be. Um, and to add to the pressure of your future work, there is still some lamas like highly accomplished in the East that are dying. Last year, so many lamas died. The previous year, the same. So it is a good moment to document all that as
Yeah,
well.
and all the people that remember all the stories are dying too. So we started doing interviews about this
Yeah.
project for my father on Zoom 3 years ago, and already a couple of people have passed away since we did that. It's like unbelievable. I also think that's an interesting
Yeah.
topic to bring up. I do think it's like I don't understand exactly how, but there should be some appreciation shown to like our parents or the people that sort of made the pathways for this younger generation to be able to study Dharma. It's like there's a lot of parents with second generation students that are Buddhists that just really did a lot so that their children could have access to this stuff. It's like it's a great gift. I don't know. It's a weird thing too, though.
Yeah.
I like because if someone sees you as a cult and you're like bringing your children in, like it's bad. But I think in Dharma, it's like you have some confidence that's
Yeah.
like good to offer to your family.
I get that, but sometimes also I think, we are just kind of all souls trying to hold to the past. But I think nowadays it's even more important. Things are changing so fast. People will forget all these stories, and there is something precious here. Even if you don't want to practice meditation in your life, just listen to these people or these stories. There is something precious there. There is another way of living. There is another way of looking at the world, and you don't have to stop researching on AI or just stop war and go back to how Tibetans live. The interesting part of this is that you can just integrate it in your life. So I think there is a really important work to be done there.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Um, yeah, I've chosen film and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you are in a unique position to do it as well.
yeah, I feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing, and I feel like yeah, television, film is just such a great way to contribute something for the general for people that are out there that haven't had any exposure to the Dharma or any of these teachers. If I can give like
Yeah.
5 million people just like a tiny 30-second glimpse of something that might interest them, then like it's worth a lot. It might just be a little bit of inspiration in the right direction,
Yeah.
but so that's I mean that it might not be anything monumental, but it's enough of a purpose to keep doing the things that I'm doing for me, as I'm sure for you. It's like
All what matters, I think, is the motivation, because you never know when you just say one word to a person, and because of that, maybe the person ended up finding a path that changed this person's life. You never know how things will impact in another person. So, how did you got involved with making movies and all this artistic part? You mentioned that that's kind of your relationship with your father before he was showing in all this calligraphy, and I can imagine that also it came somewhat from that. But when did you realize, oh, this is something that I want to do?
I mean, my father did so many like I he did poetry, all these things that we mentioned, and I sort of did all this stuff when I was a kid too. And at one point when I was 15, a friend gave me a camera, and I was in Nepal, and I went out and I took pictures and I had them developed, and I couldn't describe the feeling when I looked at those pictures. Just like I'd capture some like little kids playing and the stupa and stuff, and it's like such a magical
Mhm.
feeling. It was like something about my perception and being captured, and that was like super profound for me somehow. And I got really into photography, and that was my first gateway. It was like your perception affects reality in some way. I don't know. It's like really it was I got really into photography, and that was like definitely my start. And then I got into film, and I've always been interested in like film to some degree. But I started writing when I was really young, like 12. I started writing screenplays and fantasy stuff, and I always was like slightly interested in film. I don't know, you know what it was. I dabbled and I worked for different people, but um, when I moved to Canada, it was really great for me because I started working with like the government has grants. So I got a grant for my documentary and music videos. And
Mhm.
um, it was the first time I was like, oh, there's like support for me doing this. And I always say like I never wish on anyone to like become an artist or a filmmaker. It's like, no, don't do it. It's like horrible choice. But I had a lot of moments where it was just positive reinforcement, and I think like there's something really magical about like music videos. I was doing them for a while, and that really it just cemented it in me that this is what I wanted to do. It's like I could come up with some idea in my head and some fantasy and like make it and create something and put it out in the world, and like just all these people would. I did a music video and like kind of like 200,000 something views, which was a lot for me, and it was like I was magically
Yeah.
interacting with other people through what was going on in my mind. Um, it's like incredible to me, and I just feel like it's such a powerful medium, and there's so much that can be done in so many facets. And as the world has changed, it's like you're doing so many different things. It's like I'm a filmmaker, but I also do like my graphic design, and I, do some music production, and I'm like taking photographs and shooting stuff and editing stuff, and Just like it's just this incredible outlet for creativity, you know. And there's like, and with film in particular, there's just like so many avenues at
Yeah.
once. And I think, you know, one of the other things I really just love about film that really, another reason music video really solidified it for me is like in making a music video, you have to make like 1,000 choices. What shot, what angle, what track, what place, what
Hmm.
cut, you know, what color, when you put them. And it was like you're making all of these choices and you're just like finessing them just a little bit. Like they say, even like, you know, one frame difference in a cut can affect psychologically differently the way someone sees the whole thing, you know, and like getting into that. And then someone sees something and you just realize their experience is like the result of thousands of your choices. And that to me is like kind of fascinating. Um, that's
Right.
one of the things I just really love about film is it's like this orchestrated, you know, it's like this is like, it's like an army of things going on for like one vision. And so film is always really amazed
Right.
me, and also just the scale of impact it can have, um,
Hmm.
culturally.
And
Yeah,
now more than ever, with the different medias of distribution, it's so easy just to
and
distribute
exactly what you're saying.
video. It was
Exactly.
quite difficult
Also, with what you're
back
talking about, like
then.
the new, it's like when you make a film, you're doing other things too. It's like interviews and podcasts, and you know, the people are using clips of it for other things, and you're doing clips for Instagram, and you know, you've got a web page or something you're selling. I mean, it's like the whole world unravels around it as well. And for me, film has become this way of making connections with people now. And that's what I love about this sort of generation of what I'm doing. This version of myself that's a filmmaker the last couple of years is it's like about these intense relationships with other people and like finding someone else and seeing the magic in each other and like acting on it and being confident and just like materializing out of nothing, you know. And I think it's like I've almost felt guilty as a filmmaker as
Mhm.
things come together because it's like you see how hard people work in the world, and when you're doing like something in film that's enjoyable, it's just like so easy and so magical, and the money flows in, and you know the people are all on the same page. um and I feel like a guilt, you know, that like other people are like using a hammer to make their enough money to have dinner. It's like a different set of rules when you're an artist in some way, and that's something that's
Mhm.
always fascinated me as well.
Mhm.
I think I was really fascinated when I was young. Right?
In
Well, I
what
think I was
particular
really
way?
amazed. Like at one point when I was like, "Well, who just like?" There's so much art that's produced. It's just like someone enabling an artist for like super long time. And you know, I look back at like this classically. It was like there'd be these like wealthy British or French lords. And they bring all these artists in for like a month, and they do plays and art, and like performances, and made
Mhm.
clothing or whatever it was. And it was like none of those people could have survived without their patrons. You know, and it was like, but none of these amazing things would have been brought
Mhm.
into existence if it wasn't for these like wealthy, you know, entitled people. Um, and that's what I mean about a different
Right.
rules. Like when you start to create art, it's like you capture this collective social consciousness that's like it will enable it to happen, you know. And you look at like films, like that's the criticism is like the destruction, the budget, the money is like it's just like amazing because I mean you
Mhm.
look at like I mean what was the what I watched recently? It was the Avatar series on Netflix, and each episode costs $16 million to make,
Mhm.
and there's 8 episodes. Um, I mean, just the amount of resources and people, and I mean, it's ridiculous. But on the other hand, it's like what an amazing art form that could just like magnetize that many resources for something you're just putting on a screen. And so for me, like film has always felt like a lot of possibilities,
Right.
and I just that's really captured my imagination constantly, still does.
Right. Since most of the theme that you've been mentioning is around Buddhism, is around your father, your future projects, and so on. Nowadays, what it's a difficult question because I think you kind of answer it, but maybe in a more formal way. What's the role of Buddhism in your life nowadays? I mean, do you go to teachings? Do you, meet teachers? Feel
The
about it?
One of my close friends who traveled with me for a long time, he's like, "Oh, being a tulku is kind of like being a rock star because you have like backstage access." like to any show you go to. And like for me, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like I always get to see whatever Rinpoche, whatever teaching, I get a seat, and I can't.
Mhm.
I'm like so grateful for that. You know, it's like it's been such a like a gift and a blessing for me to have that in my life.
Do
I'm
you
Tibetan,
still
you
go to
know, like I'm
teachings?
proud
I
to be
mean,
Tibetan too. So like first off, culturally, it's like Buddhism is a huge part of Tibetan culture. So first off, I just can't separate it from like my self identity. I mean, it's I can't.
mhm.
I mean, there's layers to Buddhism, and I will always have closest to my heart like those basic rules of Buddhism, like everything compounded is impermanent. You know, uh, you know the standard stuff is like how everything divisible is suffering. I mean, it's like how all phenomena are divisible. Emotions are suffering. I mean, just basic stuff. Everything is impermanent. Impermanence,
Mhm.
basic goodness. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
the core beliefs of Buddhism are just like a decision. Um, and it's like you kind of make it once, and so um, Buddhism is part of my self identity, and it's my reminder constantly as I fuck up. That like just wake up. It's like
Mhm.
my dad like that a lot. Like wake up. It's like Dharma for me is like constantly saying to
Mhm.
myself, "Wake up." Um, and also, like
Right.
I will say, like I've been like super close to the most amazing teachers, and I just never learned anything. And that was like most of my life. And so it's like I have my moments when I've picked up stuff, but it's like it's like some kind of realization right now. Like wow, I
Mhm.
really, I let a lot filter past me, and now um, it's more important to me. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, when you become also more mature in Buddhism, not everything is new. Like at the beginning, you're so excited about everything. It's just kind of, I guess, part of your life in a way, isn't it? Like you just follow certain ethical rules, and we still aspire to practice as much as we can. But this is what we are doing now as well. We just work, I guess, within that framework.
I mean, I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. It's like, let's just accept this since we're not monastics, that, you know, we're part time Buddhists. you know, it's like we really wanted to be full time 100%. We would just, I mean,
Yeah.
there's some other desire out of life than just that still. And so
Hmm.
the conversation I was having is like, it's okay to fuck up. Like, look at us. We don't even want to be
Hmm.
full time Dharma students. We're like part time. Of course we're gonna fuck up. Like, and it's like, and then also the other funny thing of like, if you're not fucking up, then you're enlightened. And so but like that's not even a reality that's possible. All Dharma is for people that are fucking
Yeah.
up. I mean, I don't know. It's just like I guess
Yeah.
it's like I really grew up thinking I had to be perfected in some way. As was pushed on me.
Hmm.
Look blissful. Um,
Hmm.
and then there's like a stage of like revulsion in my life to it, and like now it's like not a big deal. I'm pretty grateful, and I don't know how you feel, but it's like weird to see a teacher die, and then also really weird to imagine like you talk to something with your teacher, and like you're one of the few people they ever talked with it about. What I'm saying is like many of the moments that you may have had with your teacher after they pass, you may have been one of the only people to have those thoughts expressed to you. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. it's like this shifting responsibility is what I'm talking about. It's like, well, I have a daughter, and like I'm trying to buy her a chuba. Like, so like I'm like, all right, would you wear a chuba for Tibetan events if I got it? He's like, yeah, I would. It's like, oh, that's like a huge relief for me, just emotionally, put on the clothes of our people. Like,
Mhm.
okay, like, because what I didn't want to hear was like, no, I'm never putting that shit on. Um, and so I'm grateful for all these teachers because it's not a personal relationship only. It's like a cultural lineage, right? It's a lineage. Like lineage is just precious on a personal level, right? I don't know. I wonder. I would like. I actually interested in talking to like people that met great Christian saints and stuff, and just like I don't know. I feel
Mhm.
like it's a kind of similar thing though. It's like you don't just hang out with people like that and not just feel like your life is improved for it, right? So
Right.
like there is this pressure for us now to like offer that same thing to other people. Uh, that's that whole thing. That's like the really great motivation out of your doubt, right? It's like, well, if you don't do it, it's kind of nobody else to do it. So, and then you do it for a while, and you're like,
Mhm.
okay, it's like fine, it's fine. I don't know. I was like, this in this film that I'm doing. There's this
Yeah.
young girl who's like this like Tibetan hip hop star, and she's like really young. She's 13, and she first sang in front of the Dalai Lama when she was 11. She's telling the story that like she thought they were like telling her and a boy that to do it, and then she saw the boy went. It was just she thought it was just him, and the next thing is like you're on, and she next thing she's like 10 feet in front of the Dalai Lama. He's staring at her. Um, and then she started doing. It. She's like, no, I can do this. Like it's okay. Like I can do this. Um,
Mhm.
it's like when you're just thrown into it. You know what I mean? It's like okay, it's like if someone came to you and said the Dalai
Yeah.
Lama is an asshole, you know, and you'd be like, okay, like let's have a conversation about this. I mean, that my point is at some point that becomes
Right.
your
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
role, and for me, it's like what has kicked me into like really caring and like what's kicked me to not caring, where it's just like I do it regardless, is like just thinking of my father going unrecognized.
Mhm.
I can't have that, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe that's how people get pushed
Yeah.
into being the holders of tradition and telling stories and doing what you're doing or I'm doing. Is at some point something in you is just like, well, like, I see something and I know I don't see someone else doing it or doing it how I want to do it. So you kind of just find your own motivation. Um, for me, I was like, no one's doing the things that I'm doing. No one's telling the
Oh.
stories of these Eastern masters that came over here.
Right.
It's like a complete void.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and it's a matter of time, as I was saying before. We don't have our whole life to do this, or in particular, you, the work that you are doing. Like people are passing away, we are losing. We already lost a lot when the lamas have to flee Tibet. And it's a different time, but in a way, someone has to capture all these different stories, treasures, and so on. And what you just mentioned as well, if you don't do it, maybe someone else will do it, but will do it in the wrong way or with the wrong motivation, and that's even worse than maybe not just doing anything in a way.
I went to this program with Songster
When
Khyentse a little while
you
ago, and um, one of the things he said out at their program that was quoted was, "All of the Buddha's teachings are so that you can have fun." So I think that's a good lighthearted approach.
yeah, Sonsar Khyentse has some amazing quotes. I think you spent
Yeah,
some time with him, right?
for
Or
a
you?
long time. He was just
Mhm.
I met him when he was fairly young. I met him when I was 16. He was just so counter to what everyone else was doing that I was instantly drawn to him.
Mhm.
And now he's just become huge. Like huge community. Um,
Yeah.
I'm wary of large communities, but like my experience with them is it's just people are like good, people are kind to each other, and it's not, it has every people always have their own shortcomings, but as far as like his large community, I feel like there is good people, and I'm inspired by them. I like the way they do things. So,
Yeah. And after being in contact with all the different tulkus in when you make your movie and so on, and probably your experience right now, all the things that happened since you were recognized and so on, what are your reflections about the tulku system? I know that Sonsar Khyentse criticized that in the past, but I also see the benefits of that. Having a monarchy has its benefits as well.
um,
What do you think about it? Like,
I,
how do you
it's
see
funny.
it?
Like, I'm not going to answer that question, but I'll like give my response. Like, what I want to say is that I think like Tibetan um, religious culture is incredibly intelligent and like incredibly purposeful. And I got in some arguments with people about this because there's certain standards, like there meant to be like a tulku could see 7 lives in either direction and recount, and I'm like, well, it's not, real. And they're like, well, then you're not a true Buddhist if you don't believe that. I'm like, well, I have reasons why I don't think that statement stands, people are like, prove it's a real person in this body. And it's like, for me, I'm like, you have to be able to understand that like there may be explanation, but it's like the Tibetans did things in a way that is incredibly intelligent. And the way I always express this about the tulku system is like,
Mhm.
well, I do think I am the tulku of Shechen Kontrul Rinpoche, because it's like, the thing is with the tulku system is you take someone and you say they're someone else, and then you connect them with all that person's family and students. You give them access to all of their teachings, all the places they lived. You tell them all the stories about them, and you hear all the different stories from different people. And everywhere you go, you call that person, and you get some of that person's belongings, and you study about them, and you spend time with their students and their family. And like, tell me who in the world would know more about that person than that person. You know, they literally pick someone to be an expert, to get a
Yeah.
PhD on a person, and they send them to school from a young age. And the construct of the political side, they hold the power, they hold the seat, they continue the lineage, it's believed religiously. Strategically, there is someone close to that lineage that's going to devote their whole life to preserving those teachings. So to me, it's like, I don't see either one as being a different, one being spiritual, one being not. They both serve the same purpose. It's the continuation of the karma of that teacher's life. And it is their life force continuing on, because everyone has
Hmm.
gathered it and put it into them. And so, like, I would argue anyone on this, and I've gotten into arguments with the scholars. I'm like, the 84,000 ways contradict themselves. Dharma contradicts itself. Um, the function of so many elements of Buddhism are more than one dimensional. And if you don't look at them, you're being rigid, and you're not understanding the cleverness with which Tibetan Buddhism operates. And the Tulku system was designed with two facets in
Hmm.
mind: to keep a spiritual lineage, to keep people passionate about it, and to keep the intelligence and knowledge and wisdom of that tradition fresh, ripe, and well understood. And like, it comes together, it happens, And so, are they really that person or not? I mean, I don't know. I couldn't say they are. Um, but I don't
Hmm.
know any of the other side of things that are in effect. I just know the two parts I was talking about, which is like, they become real experts in that person. And so from that
Right.
regard, it is the embodiment of them. It is the rainbow body recollected. So yeah, that's my point on being Tulku. Like, I believe in it. I believe it's a genius system. I believe it has multi purposes, and I
Hmm.
will always give the respect to the Tibetan system for being incredibly ingenious and intentional. It's not mystical and unintentional. It serves a purpose and
Right.
a function. And that's like my respect for my culture to speak that way.
Right.
It's the way it is. So yeah, I totally believe in it. I think it's a huge problem. I think
Yeah.
there's all kinds of
Yeah.
controversy around it. I don't think it's the best way things should be done. But as Zongsar Khyentse would say himself, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Um, Buddhism has
Hmm.
got some serious
Hmm.
problems right now. Spirituality has some problems. People have some serious problems right now.
Yeah.
It's not, it's like not all the world's problems are Trump. Like, like other problems too.
Hmm.
And like, you know,
Yeah.
the tulku system is like just genius and it's worthy of like a whole analysis.
Yeah, something interesting that Gesar Khyentse Rinpoche mentioned in some teachings that I was a while back in Mexico. He started criticizing, you wanted democracy. Now this is what you get: polarization. That's what you want, and that's particularly. I'm just trying to connect the dots with what you just mentioned. That's something that you don't want in a Tibetan lineage. You don't want polarization. You want something with authority who knows everything exactly
For
how
sure.
it should
Yeah.
work. And for that matter, the tulku system is perfect. It's just you have a person who knows everything, and all the people around him also know the rituals texts inside out. But regarding how it is implemented in the West, that's another issue, because in the East it seems to be a bit easier. I'm not sure if that's the case. I also know some Tulkus who didn't want to pursue the career of a lama in the East. It's not only a Western
There's
easier.
two
It's
types
more.
of tulkus and rinpoches. There's the ones that put tulku or rinpoche on their Facebook and the ones that don't. So, um,
Hmm.
I'm like, I
Yeah,
feel like,
yeah, that's also true.
that's always really bothered me. Yeah. It's like,
Hmm.
going around telling people you're a lama or rinpoche, or I don't know. Um, it's the Tibetan culture is taking advantage of people in the West, and so there's pushback now because of that. So, fair, totally fair. Got to do it right.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess I'll also say like
yeah.
I've always said this. I just have a lot of belief in like the young teachers and people to do things right, and it's just always been the nature of things. Like someone shows up, and so I'm like, yeah, I think we're okay. I'm not
Hmm.
pessimistic.
What's your connection nowadays with Shambhala? In the
I mean,
past.
I tried really actively to sort of get away because it was just so insular. Like people, the groupthink was so strong. It really bothered me, and I had a lot of different ideas, and people were really critical of me, and so I made a real effort for years and years and years to get away, and like I was successful, and I had a lot of criticisms, and like sort of some
Hmm.
things happened. And a lot of people were like, "Yeah, you were right." Um, and I've never been like super interested in Shambhala since like the early 2000s. Um, but the community has been like, I'm super
Hmm.
close with so many people. And like, I think one of the things that I constantly recognize about Shambhala is that, of course, the Sangha is super important. And in my sort of rebirth of myself, my modern sort of remake of myself in the sort of new role of running my own film production company and trying to sort of, you know, have a vision myself. The people that have come to my side have been members of my father's community. And what I noticed was I dealt with a lot of people that were outside of the community that would give me money towards projects and have a lot of issues of control and expectation. Um, and the people that were like
Hmm.
students of my father's and from the community were much more trusting, and they kind of got what I was doing. And so, like for me, what's been really interesting is I wouldn't have been able to sort of rebuild myself if it wasn't for the support of the Shambhala community. So, the one thing I will say for them is like outside of all the spiritual stuff and the you know all the things that could be criticized is it's a song of people that really care about each other, and that's been like incredibly useful and helpful for me. Um, and like I wouldn't be able to do any of the things I'm doing without it. So for me, the Shambhala community is, just a really caring group of people. They have a lot of beliefs, different people have different beliefs. There's struggles and argument, and I'm not about like pushing forward any kind of like church or organization. I'm kind of like, if people are practicing, that's great. Um, I guess my biggest thing with Shambhala is like just be careful. You're not holding on to something that's less valuable than what's going on already, just for the sake of holding on to something. So don't
Ujú,
be flexible. My dad's mind
ujú.
was flexible. It was sharp. It was adaptive. It was aware. He wasn't like conformist.
Ya.
So this is what I always say.
Ujú.
Like, if my dad were around right now, no matter what you have to say about him, he'd probably be pissed off at you and kick your ass. Like you would have thought all the things you thought and you'd be completely wrong. So it doesn't matter who you are. You just like cut your shit. Like,
Right.
you don't know what he would say or do. People
Yeah.
like Trunpa would have done this, or anyone that's like, well, my teacher would have said this to you. It's like, no, they might not have said what you're saying. Um, so
Right.
I'm like, I don't know. Um, my dad was all about change, you know, adapt, super fluid. If you look at his life, my dad was like
Ujú.
a shapeshifter, just like going with whatever happened, avoiding bullet
Yeah.
fire and floods and racism and doubt and control and financial ruin and like strife. I mean, it's just like different countries, different people, different religions. Um, it's like very these are admirable qualities.
Yeah, that's a very good aspect to incorporate in our life. No, it's changing all the time, so that's it's a very good point to leave the interview with that particular thought. So thank you very much, Gesar, again for giving the interview, and I'm really looking forward to your next projects. So whenever you have something, just send it over, and if we have to do the subtitles for people to watch it in Spanish, I'm up for it. So yeah, thank you again for all your work and
Thank
contribution.
you, Gonzalo. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. I like to talk, so I hope you have a fun time cutting things down. Also, like, thank you to you for giving me just a way to speak my mind, because I think there's a big shift in what's going on in the world today, and people are just more open than they have been to Dharma right now. So um, it's nice to be heard.
Yeah,
So thank you.
yeah. No, thank you. I'm sure we will do a second round in the future. Gracias por quedarte hasta el final del episodio. Si te gusta el contenido relacionado con el budismo, te sugiero que te suscribas en buscandocerteza.com a la lista de correo, y la próxima vez que esté publicando un ensayo, una traducción o un episodio del podcast, te voy a estar notificando por email. Ahora sí, hasta la próxima.